mean, the United Nations has statistics. They've gathered some statistics on starvation. They said that 25,000 people a day die of starvation somewhere in the world.
And you can imagine
so
that
if there were
this
500 million,
saved.
500 million
Yes.
meals are available.
Yeah.
The issue, though, I mean, everybody knows that there's enough food in the world.
Oh, definitely.
But it's distribution.
Yes, it is the distribution. And this is one of the things that Islam can offer. In addition to this, of course, the issue of zakah, alms giving or charities. A Muslim, there are some charities that they pay as an obligation and some as voluntary. And I think by using this in a good way also, it would help a lot of poor people and needy people across the globe.
What would you guess
I wish here that this goes under something in economy known as, I've read it in some books of economics, reasonable consumption of food. There's a whole theory about that. And that's what Islam does. It teaches the Muslims to have reasonable consumption of the foods because, yes, we need the extra food that we use that we can dispense with. It's not essential for us. Today I asked you, are you going to get some lunch? You mentioned, I live on 2 meals a day. And a lot of people on 2 meals per day. So it tells us that this is truly a practical issue. A lot of people come from their home without taking breakfast or just take a cup of tea or coffee, and then they get lunch, or sometimes they forget lunch and then they get a big meal. So it is doable. We see it by our eyes, and that's what Islam offers. And I hope that people who are specialized in economics would consider something like this and would exert an effort to manage how can we do this, how can we take these meals or the money and send it to the places that the people need these meals there in order to save their life.
What would you estimate? Has anybody gathered statistics on how many Muslims have enough wealth to pay zakat and how many actually from that number do pay it?
I don't know exact statistics in this field, but of course I know my friends and I know my neighbors and I know people who pay their zakat, of course, and I am one of them, but it is very little. But this little, even if it is $1,000 per year or $2,000 per year, if you compile it from every human being who is capable, if we assume that only 500 million human beings who are capable of doing this, you can do the math, multiply it by 1,000, you can get a huge number. It's even difficult to calculate. It is there and we see it, and alhamdulillah, there is a lot of goodness in that, but we need to encourage others. And by the way, we have to know that this should go to the poor. It is not our right to use it in other places. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it an obligation on the people who have the potential wealth or the money. They should give it to the poor and the needy. Part of it goes to them. So it is their right upon us. But Islam tries to keep, alhamdulillah, them in good shape instead of making them asking us as individuals to do this. Islam does it in a better way. We go to a specific place and we gather this money there, and the people who are in charge of this place, right, or this organization would do the job of distributing so that this person does not know that this money is from me or from you, to keep the relationship on the same level. Yes, because if you used to give him, he would always feel that he is inferior to you. And Islam doesn't want to get this feeling. And as you know that Islam doesn't have outcasts, doesn't have inferior people. Even if they have less jobs than you have, they are still, in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are equal to you, if not better than you in many other issues. Because the criterion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses with humanity is not how much wealth they have, or how beautiful they look, or how materialistic life they live in, but it is their hearts and their minds, how these hearts are close to Him and how they are connected to the commands that come from Him.
Okay, one of the issues that is tossed out a lot is the decline of the family with increased industrialization and this whole way of life that we see spreading around us. So is that something that Islam can make a contribution to resolve it?
I'm quite sure that you know more than I know in this. This brings up the concept of the system. When you're talking about system, you are talking about a group of issues that should be done in order to achieve something, a system, to make the system work. A factory, for example, it has many elements in it. Probably, you can say the system of an airplane, it has at least 3,000 machines or chips in it, that each one of them does a specific job in order to make the whole system work. So here we think of the concept of a system. Islam is a system. You cannot do one part and think that this works as all. So when you're talking about Islam, you need to apply all the elements of Islam in order to get the achievement that you are looking for, in order to reach the target that you're talking about. So one part of the system is the family system. So we can imagine Islam as a group of systems. One of these systems is the family system.
So what would you say that Islam has to say and contribute on the issue of racism?
I am glad that you brought this question. First, Islam teaches humanity and teaches Muslims in the beginning that all human beings are born from the same father and from the same mother, Adam and Eve. And looking into this, the details, tells us there is no superiority complex or belief or concept in the brain of Muslims. And therefore we offer humanity to think of that model. We never ever think that there is a race that is born better than another race. But it is the environment, whether it's the power that this race has or the effort that they do, but when the moment they were born, they are born equal. Otherwise, from the beginning, we would have the belief that this God or this creator is unfair. And this is impossible to believe in God who is unfair. Had we found him unfair, we would never worship him. That's why we selected Allah, who is perfect, who is away from imperfection. How can he create people who are more superior than each other? And what is my problem if I am born in a race that I have no control in it? I did not select the color of my complexion. I did not select the color of my eye. I did not select my father or mother. I am a human being. I'm born with a blank white page that has full of goodness like any other human being. Due to my efforts or the environment around me, this race can be better. When we say better, we better in a materialistic way, better in achievement, better in manufactures because of some materialistic factors that are involved. But this does not mean at all that in front of God that this race is better than that race. The whole concept of racism is totally erased from the roots of this religion by the, alhamdulillah, the guidance of Almighty Allah. I never look at a black or a yellow or a red-necked person that I am better than him or he is better than I am. I know that he is a human being like me. In humanity, he is born from parents, and those parents are from grandparents until it ends up to Adam. And guess what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained it to us in very openly, that and Adam himself is from earth. He's taken from earth. So why do you want to be more superior than me? Why? Do you think that you are superior than me? All of us were created from Adam, and Adam was created from the earth. So alhamdulillah, and I think we find, you, I, and all people find place for them in Islam. The outcast, the poor, the servants, the hired people, the VIPs, all of them have place in Islam, and all of them are from the same root, from Adam and Eve. And I think this would solve and erase the problem of racism among people. If they know that nobody is superior by birth than others, I think this problem can disappear. And that's why you will find lots of blacks, lots of whites, lots of Indians, lots of Japanese are becoming Muslims day after day because they discover more realities and truth about this great religion. I think this is one of the things that Islam can offer humanity. So alhamdulillah, and I think we find, you, I, and all people find place for them in Islam. The outcast, the poor, the servants, the hired people, the VIPs, all of them have place in Islam, and all of them are from the same root, from Adam and Eve. And I think this would solve and erase the problem of racism among people. If they know that nobody is superior by birth than others, I think this problem can disappear. And that's why you will find lots of blacks, lots of whites, lots of Indians, lots of Japanese are becoming Muslims day after day because they discover more realities and truth about this great religion. I think this is one of the things that Islam can offer humanity.
You know, from my own background, I grew up in a suburb of Washington, D.C. We're just 2 blocks from the city line. And in 1968, Martin Luther King when he was assassinated, April 4th, 1968. Rioting broke out all over the U.S. And we were doing the laundry, my mother and I was living just with my mother at the time. We were in this apartment buildings, so she was putting the laundry in the machine, and I was just sort of hanging out. I was about, I think I would have been 12 years old at the time. So I had an empty milk carton, and I hit it under my foot, and she got so angry with me because she thought that something was going on because the riots were going on
here and there
in different parts of the city. And when we first moved into that apartment development, it was 1965, and black people were not allowed to live in those apartments. The apartheid system was still in place at that time. Then within a few months, I think, they passed the Equal Housing Opportunity Act, so those things began to change. But the school I went to was, there were some black students, but majority white. And in my classes, there was only one black student, a woman, a girl. And the black students, they stayed to themselves. White students stuck to themselves. I was really afraid of black people. I used to have this recurring dream when I was in junior high school and like this, where I would be going down into the city, and then I'd find myself surrounded with black people, and then I'd wake up, it was like an anxiety dream. And so I just was very afraid of black people.
Before you were a Muslim?
Yeah, before I was Muslim. And then when I accepted Islam in Pakistan, and then when I came back to America, I found that virtually everyone who was accepting Islam in America was black, African American. So I didn't have any problem with that, because we had the religion in common. So I learned how to relate to these people. Before that, I didn't. What do you have in common with them? And I remember my.
Tell me about the common things that you have with other races. What do you have in common with the blacks, or with the Indians, or with the Africans, or with the Egyptians?
Well,
what is common? I mean, if you are Muslims, what is common? Of course, the religion is one thing.
I mean, this is something I've traveled all over the world since I've become a Muslim, and so when you walk into a masjid anywhere in the world, I've never had that sense that, what are you doing here? I've never had that sense. People may be curious, and they'll come up and, they may want to ask, where are you from, etc. But there's no sense that I'm intruding or trespassing. you know, when I make wudu, it's the same, the ablution, it's the same as a person from Malaysia or Morocco or Nigeria or something.
Each one of you have 2 hands and 2 eyes and 2 ears.
Yeah, so it's the same thing. And when it's time to pray, you know, if I'm led by a Malaysian, a Nigerian, a Moroccan, it doesn't matter. As long as there's a minimum level of, ability to recite properly, etc. Doesn't matter where you're from. Our prayer is the same wherever. I mean, when you're standing side by side like that, you know, shoulder to shoulder, ankle to ankle, and you know, you're moving in unison. You put your head on the ground. You're turning towards your Creator. I mean, that right away, you know, that makes that sense of
brotherhood.
Brotherhood.
Yeah, in fact, I have a personal experience in this. The first time for me to visit the United States, this was back in 1987. There was a retreat, and a lot of people attended it. Students from different places in the States with different colors and teachers from different countries. And it was in Washington, D.C., in one of the hotels. Then one of the engineers who was working in the hotel as a technician or expert in this, he said that I started observing you. After that, we learned the story from him. And I found that this religion is the true religion. I said, how did you discover this? He said that every day I used to observe you while you are doing your salat. And after some time, he discovered that there were some of us directors of universities, some of us are VIPs, and some of us are average people, some of us are very poor, different colors. He said that this religion is great because I found that there's no place for the VIPs or no place for the poor. I would found that when you make sujood on the ground, I would find the head of the best of you would come to the ground close or even touching the feet of another person who in other religion is considered an outcast or something away or something very poor or trivial. And in this religion, I found that the head of the best of you would come to the feet of the worst of you. This is in his viewpoint. He didn't know who is the best and who is the in Islamic way. But this is his own judgment. He said that I've never seen a religion that does not differentiate between the rich and the poor and the famous and the unfamous in such a way. So I had a feeling in my heart that this is the religion of the truth. That's what Islam can offer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot
without any effort from the Muslims, just him observing the Muslims, he reached to this conclusion.
You know, there's a couple that remind me of a couple of stories. One was I had a friend, rahmatullah alayhi, he opened the first halal meat shop in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And he is from a Jewish background, accepted Islam in Pakistan.
Okay.
And so he had people from some different backgrounds working in his shop. And one of the neighbors eventually, I think, accepted Islam. I don't remember if they accepted Islam or anything, but they once came over and expressed, they just made this comment, because the shop was, I think, it was in a borderline area of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is very much an area of neighborhoods. I remember one friend of mine from Philadelphia is African American. You know, he found himself in an Italian part of town, and you know, it's almost like a death sentence. Yeah, you take your life in your hands. You know, there was a case like that in the 80s, where this African American teenager, he, for some reason, you know, he found himself in an Italian part of town, and some other teenagers with baseball bats, they started chasing him, and in his desperation to get away from them, he ran up onto the freeway. He was trying to cross the freeway, and he was hit by a car and killed. So, anyway,
because of racism.
Because of racism. Yeah. This non-Muslim was observing just the interaction of the people who worked in the shop. You know, they were standing outside the shop and chatting. You know, white, black, Indian, like this. And they were so impressed. Yeah, they were so impressed by the way they dealt with each other. You know, came over and began to ask, you know, what's going on? Who are you people?
Before we end this episode, I think I'd like to get back to your dreams. You still have dreams of
anxiety dreams?
Anxiety dreams?
No, I don't.
You no longer have them.
That was something from childhood. But, in connection with this also, two other things. One, when I was living in Sharjah, at a certain time, that's in the United Arab Emirates, we had like a sort of a community of expatriate Muslims from the West. And we started looking around. I'm white American, I have an African American wife. One of my neighbors, African American, he has a wife from Indian background, and another who is white American, and one who's Filipino. He had 3 wives. And then another neighbor who is white American, and he had a Bengali wife. Another neighbor, he had one wife who's African American, he's African American, and one who's Indonesian. So, you just see
representation of the whole world.
I mean, it's just no problem.
This change, I think, came to people when they became Muslim. I would ask the viewers and the audience to reflect upon these phenomena, because it's really amazing. It's something that when you feel that you have friends and family members from every country, we feel that we are all brothers. Because in fact we are, because we are from Adam and Eve. And there is no difference.
And also what you were saying about this issue of status and with regard to the salat. I remember somebody told me a story about Sheikh Zayed, rahmatullah alayh, the former ruler of the Emirates. He passed away a few years ago. That he was driving, and it was time for salat, and they were on like a highway, and he pulled off. There was like this little sort of, it was just sort of basically a thrown together little place for prayer on the side of the road. It was next to like a construction site or something. It was very like improvised prayer structure, and it was time for Maghrib. So when Maghrib comes, there's a very limited time for it. And he pulled off, and he got out, and there were some like laborers there from the site. Some of them, it was a construction site, so there were some of them were Hindus, and they were also Muslims. And
you're saying the king was praying beside laborers from different nationalities.
Yeah, and
something you've never seen.
Yeah, I mean the non-Muslims are just like completely astonished. How can this possibly happen?
Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are guided to this religion, and at the same time we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide the viewers and to guide humanity to his religion, to enjoy the peace and the comfort that every Muslim enjoys.
Jazakumullah khair. Call it quits there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.